Romance, espionage, double agents, fire, interesting spouses. A great cast with an Oscar winner and 4 Oscar nominees. Real death, deception, lots of connections to James Bond movies, postage stamps, and a lot more are found in the 1974 Blake Edwards movie, The Tamarind Seed. Hi, this is Dan.
And Tom.
Of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Join us as we cultivate and decode the romantic spy movie, The Tamarind Seed. Now, before we dive into this, Tom, we're calling this a romantic spy movie, and we've all heard your thoughts on adding romance to a spy movie. So, does it bother you here?
No, absolutely not, because they didn't add romance to a spy movie. This is one of the times where I think romance works because it's woven into the plot and it's an integral part of the movie. What I object to when romance is added to most spy movies is oftentimes it doesn't advance the story. And my classic example here is from the movie The Heroes of Telemark. They stuck this romance in there that wasn't part of the real story, didn't need to be there, didn't add anything. And so I explained more into who the characters were and what they did in that episode we did on The Heroes of Telemark. But here in The Tamarind Seed, I'm good with it. It's a key plot point.
All right. And any movie with Omar Sharif and Oscar Homolka, heck, I'm all in.
The 2 O's. Hey, they're the double O's.
The double O's. If this was their 7th movie together, that would have been cool. All right. And this is 9 years after Omar Sharif's portrayal of Dr. Zhivago, as we all remember. He was also in Lawrence of Arabia, Funny Girl, a whole lot more. He's a talent. All right, Oscar Homolka. He actually replaced Jack Hawkins in the role of General Golitzyn here because of Hawkins' sudden death in 1973. This is Homolka's final movie also, by the way. We loved him in Funeral in Berlin and Sabotage as well. And now Julie Andrews is in this too. She's as skilled as all these guys and starred in everything from Mary Poppins to Torn Curtain and dozens of others. Her range is enormous. All right, so let's begin decoding and cultivating The Tamarind Seed. This movie was based on Evelyn Anthony's 1971 novel of the same name. The title is well defined in the movie and is used as an interesting device later on in the movie.
I like how they did that.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Because, I mean, you're looking at this going like The Tamarind Seed. Well, how's this going to be a spy movie with that title?
Yeah, and I always want to know why it's called what it's called.
But it works.
Yes, it does. Now, this is a Cold War espionage movie, not an action-packed spy thriller. This is more in line, I think, with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy than any Bond or Mission Impossible movies, that's for sure. It's not as dark by any means as The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, but it's more like Five Fingers with James Mason. Are there moles? Are there traitors? What agents are doing what and to whom? The plot follows a British Home Office assistant, Judith Farrow, played by Julie Andrews, who meets Fyodor Sverdlov, who's played by Omar Sharif, while vacationing in Barbados. She's there innocently enough. Her boss suggested she go to one of those pleasant little islands in the Caribbean. When she asked to take her holiday, she chose Barbados, which makes sense since given its history with Great Britain.
Yeah, and I like the way they started this movie because we see Julie Andrews walking alone on a beach. She's not looking happy or joyous. She's very pensive. So we're wondering, and that's a good thing. What's going on, right? We're trying to figure that out. At one point, she's walking with her hands behind her back. That could show confidence, but doesn't look like that here. Sometimes it means thoughtfulness. And we see this as she recalls a fiery crash of a car off of a cliff. Yeah. Presumably somebody was in that car. So
they got their money's worth out of that shot, I think.
Yeah, they used it a few times. Okay, as we said, her boss told her to go to a pleasant little island in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And we find that out because in the flashback, she's talking to her boss in the office who's giving her the advice to go to the Caribbean. And that flashback is in black and white.
I like the flashbacks.
It's matter of fact.
I like how they did these.
It's kind of like in Spy Intervention when they changed resolution. Here, when they were doing a flashback, it was black and white, or in some cases black and red. And in Spy Intervention, when we were on the spy stuff, it was in one resolution. And when we were in the other stuff, it was in a different resolution. So very similar thing here.
I like the concept of using flashbacks to tell a story, though.
Yeah, and it's really kind of cool because when they do it, and sometimes it's pretty small, they go back and forth between the color and the black and white for the flashback. I mean, there's one point here early on where she says goodbye, Richard, to a guy as she's leaving him. Well, that was a flashback, so that's black and white. These are some of the things she's thinking about while walking on the beach and having flashbacks to why she needed her holiday to take some time on the beach.
Yeah, it all is adding to the story that we need to know. This is great. I thought that was well done.
So all the while she's walking on the beach, having her thoughts, we're going black and white and color, back and forth between thinking about the past and now. There's a very solid score underneath this. And I'm trying to figure out, how did they get such a good score?
Yeah, it should be a solid musical score, I think. John Barry.
Oh,
We've heard of him. He's the Tamarind Seed composer. So the score is definitely a highlight of the movie. This is especially true, I think, when we're talking about the score here. There's an airport scene towards the end. The musical score is just perfect for what is happening. There's a segment with no one talking. There are things going on, and the music, foreboding, very tense music, dominates the scene intentionally. Great stuff. I turned the audio off, actually, for a few seconds, since only the music was playing. There was no other dialogue and no other sounds, and the scenes kind of fell flat. The music added so much richness to those scenes. And, oh yeah, the title sequence, well, the title sequence feels a bit Bondian as well.
Oh, how come, Dan?
Well, it's got bright red background, silhouettes, water or rushing fire all around. It kind of feels like a little bit more like a James Bond movie to a degree. So, Maurice Binder strikes again. Yes.
Yeah, well, we don't have naked silhouettes
stuff.
here. We get Omar Sharif and Julie Andrews.
Yeah, no, we don't have that. Now, why Fyodor Sverdlov is in the Bahamas, that's a little murky. We know why she's there. And he meets Judith Farrow, and he tells her that he's a Soviet attaché.
Okay, I know attaché is a real diplomatic role.
Yeah.
But after watching the movie The Birdcage, where they told Senator Keeley that the character of Armand was a cultural attaché, ever since I can't hear attaché without cracking up and thinking of the movie. Again, it's a real role, but because of that movie, it's ruined the name for me.
All right. Okay. All right. Anyway, back to the movie. So this Judith Farrow and Fyodor Sverdlov, there's kind of a little budding romance going on here. They seem to be quickly attracted to each other. And it also attracts the attention of the British intelligence, who are suspicious of Sverdlov. They're trying to figure out why Sverdlov is in Barbados. He must be on a mission, they think. But what is it? Is he trying to recruit Judith as a spy? Is there something else going on? Most of the movie is about answering this question.
Yeah, one question they never do answer is what he was doing in Barbados from the first place. Was he there because he knew she was going to be there? They never really tell us that.
No, they don't tell us that, but we're going to have to assume that, I think. Later, the Russians also become suspicious of Sverdlov as well. That said, some very nice side plots add a lot to the movie. There's a double agent, mole trader. I'm not sure what to call this person, but...
Yeah, I actually like trader for this one, Dan.
Okay.
If it's the character I think you're talking about.
Yeah. All right, that might fit. And there's a marriage that is used as a cover-up. There's a pregnant woman whose husband has been cheating on her. In fact, we learn of at least 5 or 6 people who are involved in extramarital affairs. So there's a lot of stuff going on here.
Are you saying that the spy movies make for strange bedfellows?
Hey, there you go. All right. And later on, Sverdlov steals a classified file, hoping to use it as a leverage for something that he wants from the British. Judith and Fyodor's relationship becomes increasingly dangerous for a lot of reasons.
Let me stop you here, Dan. I think we should probably leave the plot here so we don't give things away.
Yeah.
I think we've got the setup. We've got this romantic thing. We've got this Judith and Fyodor guy. We've got some weird stuff happening in the background with some of the other characters. And so let's just move on from the plot and talk about some of the positives of the Tamarind Seed.
Yeah, a lot of them.
The first positive is the performance of its excellent cast. Judith Farrow is played by 3-time Academy Award Best Actress and a leading role nominee, Julie Andrews. She won one of those nominations for her role as Mary Poppins. So, shockingly, Andrews plays Farrow well and is a good casting choice against her male lead.
That wasn't a hard casting choice, as Andrews was married to the director and screenwriter Blake Edwards for 41 years till he died in 2010. So, yeah, Okay.
Well, and
But she was good.
yeah, it was good. And she appeared in 7 of Edward's movies. But she mostly plays this role well. But I'm going to point out something when we talk about the negatives about her performance that I wasn't that wild about. For the most part, I would say I liked it. But there was one point where I didn't.
Mhm.
Now, she also was in Hitchcock's spy movie Torn Curtain, Paul
Yeah.
Newman. And we talked about that in a few episodes. There's a different take here on the character she's playing in a spy movie.
Yeah, and she was great, Tori Kern. I thought she was great. And okay, the male lead here was Oscar-nominated actor Omar Sharif.
Another slouch.
Yeah, he plays Fyodor Sverdlov. His very expressive face is helpful as Fyodor tries to woo Judith. He also has to show some strong acting in his espionage scenes. I liked him a lot in this one. He could turn on the charm when he wanted to, but he was also a shrewd attaché. He's cocky, self-confident, sure of himself, almost all the way through.
He gives a great performance in this part. I really liked him in this movie.
Yeah, I thought he was fantastic. And of course, we get one of our favorite spy movie actors, Oscar Homolka. He plays the Soviet general Golitzyn, Sverdlov's boss. We loved Homolka's character, Colonel Stock, in the Harry Palmer movies, and we talked about him in our episode on the Hitchcock classic Sabotage, where he was excellent as well.
Okay, I've got to jump in here again, Dan.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
because of this name. This is another spy movie where we hear the name Golitzyn. I think there's 3 of them, but I can't remember the one of them. But I know we mentioned the name Golitzyn in our episode on the first Mission Impossible movie. Now, that episode was our 3rd podcast ever, which we released on June 17th, 2019. We called out this character's name, Golitzyn. We tied it to a real Russian spy who defected from Russia in 1961, and he wrote 2 books on KGB leadership practices. We're betting that they're using his name here as a callback in the Tamarind Seed.
Yeah, no question about it. And then we got Anthony Quayle. He plays Jack Loader, the British intelligence officer monitoring the situation with Judith and Fyodor. Quayle has a rich history in spy movies and TV series. We mentioned him in our episode on The Eagle Has Landed, and he also appeared in Operation Crossbow. And he played Francois Villers in the TV miniseries The Bourne Identity, among many others. Quayle has 1 Oscar nomination and 1 BAFTA nomination to his credit. I thought he was really good in this movie.
But I like how Anthony Quayle played this role as well. Loader was an officer, and he must have been pretty high up because he pulled off some kind of amazing things in this movie where he didn't seem to have to go ask for permission. And some of them were risky calls. And Quayle made that believable.
Yeah,
right? Now,
he was good.
Now, another actor to call out, Dan O'Herlihy. Now, he plays Fergus Stevenson, who's a British diplomat. He has an extremely key role in this movie, and we don't want to give it away.
Yeah.
Let's just say O'Herlihy plays a slimy character who has multiple secrets very well. O'Herlihy has 1 Oscar nomination in his credits, and in 1952, he was in a movie called Operation Secret. And the main plot of that movie pretty much is what his part was, or at least part of what his part was in this movie, The Tamarind Seed. And so it's kind of interesting that the whole movie was around his plot in Operation Secret, where here, just part of his role is what happens in The Tamarind Seed.
Yeah. And then let's not forget Sylvia Sims. She played Fergus's wife, Margaret Stevenson. This was a fascinating role.
She was great.
Where Sims had to play a very smart character who was in it for herself. She knew about her husband's secrets, I think.
She did.
Yeah, and used them to her advantage. I think Sims nailed the role here. I thought she was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, this was the role I liked the most in The Tamarind Seed. I mean, she was smart. She would talk back to her husband and say, I know about this, and so this is going to happen.
She was good.
And it was great.
Her delivery was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Totally believable. And Sylvia Sims received a Best Supporting Actress BAFTA nomination for her performance in The Tamarind Seed. That's the only BAFTA or Oscar nomination this movie received.
Yeah, she was really good. Right. Now, I also want to briefly mention 2 other cast members. Brian Marshall, who plays George McLeod, and McLeod is Loader's assistant. And he's got an interesting background in this movie that you'll see come out. And anyways, James Bond fans will recognize Brian Marshall as Commander Talbot in The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah.
And James Bond fans will also recognize two of the henchmen who did get a decent amount of screen time. One was John Sullivan, who did stunts in Moonraker. The other would be Terrence Plummer, who was in Tomorrow Never Dies and The Man with the Golden Gun. It's nice to see these actors who have some smaller roles come forward and be visible in some of these other movies.
Let's jump into our second positive of the Tamarind Seed. It's plot. This is considered by many to be a positive and by others a negative, depending on which review you read or who you listen to. We liked the plot. This isn't a high-action spy movie, like we said. It's much more cerebral than action-oriented. Some have called it slow-burn storytelling. We agree with this, but we liked it in this movie. It was both a stylish and mature espionage drama. Not a lot of action. There is some. And it has some interesting conversations about communism versus capitalism and things like that that we think actually works. And this is 1974, this movie came out. So a lot of that kind of talk was going on constantly. It isn't preachy with those kind of conversations. We were kept pretty much in the dark most of the movie trying to figure out what might happen. The plot has got a lot of twists and turns, so you actually have to pay attention to what's going on. This is a dialogue-heavy movie.
Yeah, and I liked how they handled one particular subject, right?
Okay.
It was minor, but it was an important situation talking about homosexuality. Remember, this was 4 years before Billy Crystal's character, Jodi Dallas, became one of the first gay characters in a U.S. TV series. Today, this would have been more front and center, but back then it was subtle. If you weren't paying attention, you might have missed the whole subplot there. It comes up a couple times, but it's handled very subtly.
Yeah, it was minor though. It was a minor aspect,
well, but it was also an important point about one of the characters.
Yeah. All right. The third positive, the highlight in this relationship is the relationship between Farrow and Sverdlov. The chemistry between those two characters was, I think, for the most part, very well done. Julie Andrews and Omar Sharif made these roles and their interactions very believable. It looked natural. His cockiness, her kind of laid back kind of attitude and thoughtful process. They just were terrific in every scene they were in. Except maybe one. Right. Now, another strong relationship in this movie was between Margaret and Fergus Stevenson. Mm-hmm. They had a very strong chemistry, albeit an odd one. Yeah, that was an odd one.
That worked well in the Tamarind Seed. It was a bit quirky, but I think it worked here. Yeah. Right. And then now the fourth positive I think we'll call out is the cinematography and the use of some beautiful locations in the Caribbean. We mentioned earlier that John Barry was the composer, but the cinematographer who produced some of these scenes that this music played behind was no slouch either. It was three-time Academy Award winner Freddie Young as a cinematographer on the Tamarind Seed.
Freddie Young won Oscars for Ryan's Daughter, Dr. Zhivago, and Lawrence of Arabia. Kind of big movies.
Yeah.
He also had two other Oscar nominations for Nicholas and Alexandra and Ivanhoe. So yeah, I'm not surprised the cinematography was a positive for the Tamarind Seed.
I'm going to go a little bit off topic. I'm going to try to tie it back together. You may think I'm weird with this one, Dan.
Yeah, okay.
The famed producer Merv Griffin found that people were fans of actors and actresses with bigger than normal heads. Not freakishly big, right? But just bigger than normal. I mean, right. Vanna White and Pat Sajak are his two prime examples of that. Again, their heads aren't grotesquely large, but they're slightly larger. And they did a lot of research on it and found that actors who had slightly larger heads.
Where are you going with this?
I'm going to get there, okay? The way Freddie Young shot Julie Andrews and Omar Sharif, I think accentuates and plays on this. Because Sharif's head is slightly large in real life, and Julie Andrews is not. And if you watch this movie, look at how Young played on this. At times, Andrew looks tiny next to Sharif, not just in stature, but her head. And he's only 2 inches taller than Andrews. So it was one of those things that just kind of jumped out at me. And again, don't think I'm nuts here. And depending at the conversation in the movie, Sharif's head looked much more formidable than Andrew's. And I thought it was fascinating in a way they kind of had him dominating as he's trying to get his way. And
Yeah.
so,
Well,
and that's
that's
a
good. That's good.
it's
Actually,
a
okay.
cinematography.
I'm gonna say you're not too crazy here.
It's a little weird. It's a little out there, but
But
I'm watching this. I'm going like Merv Griffin.
I like when they use the camera to develop what they're trying to portray on the screen. And he was dominant in this movie in that relationship and virtually in everything he did. And that's a good point. All right.
Now, I think the photography and cinematography were pretty straightforward, but they used a lot of mirror shots throughout the movie, seeing the characters in a mirror rather than directly.
Yes.
There's another really good reflective shot towards the end. That time it's not a mirror, but it's a window.
Same concept.
And it means you've got to pay attention to the reflections in the windows. There's a scene with two adjacent windows in Barbados when Judith and Fedor are outside Judith's hotel room. In one window, you see the reflection of the outside. And on the other window, you can see inside. And the windows are, I mean, it's a sliding glass door. The two glass panes are side by side. And one of them you can see out, and one you see what's going on the outside. It's really cool.
Yeah, I thought that was clever. I thought actually the camera angles and what they did with the reflections things throughout was pretty good. There are a few shots here and there that are outstanding in the camera angle stuff, like when Sverdlov gets on the elevator towards the end. It's a great moment. There's one shot looking up at his face while the elevator is going down. And it was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And it makes us wonder, what is he up to? Or is there something else that's going to happen here? Or something he doesn't know about that's going to happen? Or are we going to be surprised? I thought that was a pretty good shot.
Okay, he gets in that elevator, and I keep waiting for Peter Franks to arrive. because this metal elevator, it's very similar to the one at Tiffany Case's house in Diamonds Are Forever.
It is.
And I was really surprised in the Tamarind Seed that a fight didn't break out here.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie was released only 3 years after Diamonds. It made my mind shift to that movie, and I was hoping to see a fight.
Yeah. I was thinking something there was going to happen as well. Another great shot right after that is when Sverdlov walks into the office on the lower floor, and everyone stands up, showing respect for him. Wow, it's a powerful shot, and it shows how powerful he is. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that room was full of typists and I guess analysts.
Yeah.
And he likely would not go into that room often, but I agree with you. He walks in and boom, they stand up and stop doing whatever they're doing. Yeah. What a great show of respect.
Yeah. The first time we see him in that scene, he actually looks a bit nervous when he's asking to see some files. You can see that he's rubbing his hands together as if to warm them up, like only going to get in a cold sweat or something. And then he wrings them for a second. So this is the first time in the entire movie where he actually looked a little nervous to me.
If he had only brought an attaché with him. Sorry, I had to.
Yeah. All of this adds, I think, to the tension that we're seeing on the screen. Of course, the music's good too, again. And then back to the elevator with this repetitive, tense music playing as he's waiting anxiously for the elevator. Of course, like, oh man, the elevator gets here quickly and it's not coming quick enough for him. All great shots.
Yeah, and again, will anybody be in that elevator waiting for him?
Yeah, I know. There you go. And I thought there were some good lines in the movie as well. I thought the dialogue in general was pretty good. And there's a lot of dialogue. So to write this much dialogue and to do it that well, I thought was outstanding. Like there's one great line I love that General Golitzyn says to Fyodor Sverdlov. Well, as I remember, seduction can have its compensation. I thought that was a good line because it ties up all what's going on in this movie. And again, it solidifies the doubts we have in our mind as to what is going on. So that was great. Sverdlov tells Golitzyn that Judith Farrow can be an important agent, as important an agent as Blue. Blue's another thing that is there in this movie. That's a very important thing, since she knows all of the secrets of Neeson from the home office. So the whole scene is a very great scene. And Homolka, I love this. Well, when he's smoking his cigarette, when he's talking to Fyodor, it's just fantastic. You watch every detail of his face and how he manipulates the smoke Yeah, it's just fabulous when you look at this, coming through his nose, doing this and doing that. The smoke is part of his acting here. I thought it was stunning, actually.
Yeah, it really
What a great
was.
actor.
It really
Yeah.
was.
All right, Tom, those are some of the positives of the Tamarind Seed. Let's talk about some of the negatives.
Yeah, there are some.
Yeah, there's a few. There's always some. Let's get one out of the way right up front because it's all we're going to talk about pacing.
Oh no.
All right, almost every movie, especially these slow burn type movies, everyone's like, what's with the pacing on this thing? Some people thought, really, the pacing was too slow. Oh my gosh. I mean, the pacing in a movie is an issue. Yeah, okay. All right, yeah. There are a lot of shots of Julie Andrews and Omar Sharif looking pensive, but that is required for the story. Their characters were thinking constantly, and the dialogue, again, unfolding adds to the story. So, was it a little overdone? I don't know. Maybe it was a little overdone, but I thought it worked. I thought it
for
was
me,
okay.
I thought it dragged a few times. I mean, this is one of the challenges of building this cerebral, romance-driven spy movie instead of an action one. You've got to have time for the character relationships to build.
Yeah.
So it didn't bother me, but I can definitely see why some people thought that, especially if they were a fan of spy action movies as opposed to espionage movies.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Now, the second negative is something I mentioned before about the positives was Julie Andrews' performance. Some thought she lacked emotional depth. Now,
Okay.
for me, I thought she worked very well in the role, and the emotional depth was really good there with all the romantic scenes as Sharif is trying to woo her. But there's a pivotal point when Judith and Fedor go back to Barbados, and there's a change in what happens with her character and the relationship. I'm not sure I buy her performance at this point. She doesn't seem to change character, but the situation changed dramatically there.
Yeah. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. Andrews was terrific, except for the one point where I think that the same thing you're talking about here. I thought, okay, well, I got to have a little willing suspension of disbelief for this scene. So I think that part is true. But the pacing, it didn't bother me. The pacing, I think, was the movie. It developed the entire story that we needed to hear. And I don't think there was a lot of fluff in that. And her not being emotionally, that she lacked emotional depth, when you find out what's going on in the beginning of the story when she's walking on the beach and you see the car crash thing as she reminisces about that in her head, you understand where she's coming from.
Well, and her leaving another relationship. Or was that the same relationship? At that point, we don't know.
There was another one too. So you know her background. When you know her background, you can't say she lacked emotional depth. You understand why she looks the way she looks and why she acts the way she acts. So I thought that was fine. Now, the third negative is that while we listed the plot as a strength, some thought it was too predictable. I want to meet those people. My head was spinning.
I'm still on why was he in Barbados at the beginning?
Yeah, that we wanted to know. All right. I think some parts of the plot were predictable a little bit, but there were some very, very nice twists. I think that many of the people who say that they had the ending figured out in advance, they got to be stretching this. They got to be stretching
especially
this.
After everything culminates. And there's a conversation that Loader has.
There's a lot of points and subpoints and subplots and storylines going on here. I want to meet the person who has us all figured out because that would be incredible. They intentionally played this very, very well so that we are kept in the dark a little bit and that we are guessing. We, as the viewer, constantly played back and forth as to whose side who is on and what will happen. It is done, I thought, to perfection, with nuanced communications going on continuously. Just when you think you have it, you are twisted around again. So I'm mostly dismissing this negative.
I mean, I'll agree there was some predictability, but I would not say that was a hallmark of a negative of this movie because there was a lot of unpredictability as well.
Yeah.
All right. So the final negative point we're going to point out is that some people thought there was some genre confusion in the positioning of the Tamarind Seed. They thought this was a romance movie with some spy thriller stuff thrown in. However, I think this was a romance spy movie because it was all intertwined. The romance was required for the espionage stuff to work. I mean, Dan, what do you think?
The romance was part of the spy thriller. It was integral to the spy thriller. Without it, it would have been far less intriguing. It made the espionage elements more exciting, and actually, the espionage was enveloped by the relationships going on and the romance going on. So, no, it was a must for this movie. All right, let's see if there's any influencers from and for this movie, The Tamarind Seed. This is something we do in a lot of our episodes. So let's take a look. All right. 2 non-henchman deaths appear to happen in The Tamarind Seed. There are lots of things happening, and we won't say what happens here in case you have not seen this movie, but it is well executed. We'll just say that we see some elements here that we have seen in other spy movies for sure. For instance, You Only Live Twice, Diamonds Are Forever, From Russia with Love, Mission Impossible, Kingsman, The Golden Circle, Spy, Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows, and a whole lot more.
Oh, you're pointing to one key element of the movie with all of
Don't
those.
say what it is.
I won't say what it is.
But it's, I love when there's other influences on movies, and I love to see where they relate. That's good. Yeah. We all do it. We both do that. Yeah.
Now, there's another scene that may have been influenced by Fleming's Casino Royale. And this is the scene towards the end where 2 characters appear at a nursing home with one of the characters convalescing. Skyfall, The Bourne Identity, and Mission Impossible 3 all have similar scenes. So it's kind of interesting how, as we get into the wrap-up phase after the main event happens, spy movies are compelled at points to say, oh, now let's see somebody recovering.
Yeah, and Foreign Correspondent, Hitchcock's movie, spy movie, is, I think, another influencer here in a way. At one point in The Tamarind Seed, there is a black and white movie playing on TV.
What movie is that, Dan?
It's Hitchcock's Foreign Correspondent. It's on the television, which was a spy movie, of course, that included romance, diplomats, political parties, convalescing characters, and more that we see here in The Tamarind Seed.
You know, it's funny you say that because when that scene comes up, I'm going like, well, I know that movie. What is that movie? I'm trying to remember what movie it was.
Yeah.
Cool that you're calling out Foreign Correspondent here.
Yeah, there it is on the TV in the movie. All right. Now, there's also a bed scene, and the headboard is brass, and it looks a bit like a cage, kind of like Thunderball. And we do see a zoo scene earlier in this movie, so, what the heck? It reminded me, anyway, of Fiona and Bond in bed.
Yeah, but I would say that the 2 characters in that scene in bed were very Bond and Fiona Volpe-like.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there was none of that.
It's clean, right? We're not saying it's clean, right. But it's very different feel,
different atmosphere. Yeah, and also at one point there are some people getting on a boat in Barbados, and the name of the boat is Catita, which is Spanish, and it means parrot, sometimes parakeet. So I'm thinking, why do they call this boat Catita? I mean, there's always a reason. So I think, well, what do parrots do? They listen, they repeat. Is this a clue? I don't know if it was really a clue in this movie, but those on board are certainly following orders. They're listening to their superiors, they're repeating what they need to do, and they're going to do it. And here's the other thing. The boat is registered in La Guaira, which is a Venezuelan port town. Actually, it's the main port town. Now, what was this port town called before it was that? It was formerly known as Vargas. Thunderball, anybody? Vargas. Oh, come on, we got a character there. Is that a little stretch or what?
I'm not sure, Dan. That might be a stretch.
All right. Well, pay attention to Catita. That's a very important part of this movie.
Well, that scene is a very important part of the movie. I'm not sure about the boat name.
All right, we want to end with a few touches of realism that we like. And it was here in The Tamarind Seed. The first is when Judith Farrow and Fyodor Sverdlov first meet in Barbados. Farrow is on a chaise lounge reading a Kingsley Amis book, The Riverside Villas Murder. This was the current Amis book out at the time of The Tamarind Seed. We remember Kingsley Amis had the first James Bond continuation novel, Colonel's Son.
That's a nice touch. Now, another touch of realism I wanted to point out was Feodor's warning to Judith about the Manchineel tree.
Okay.
This was a tree whose name Feodor said he couldn't pronounce. He just talked about this was a tree that if it rained and the sap dripped on you, it could burn you. This is a real tree. It does grow in the Caribbean. So it being on Barbados, I've been on Barbados. They do have those trees.
Is it poison?
It is poisonous. I mean, that was all realism here.
They should cut those trees down.
Well, they have an ecological purpose.
All right.
So I thought this was a nice touch of realism. I just wish they would have specifically called the name of the plant out, because if you're in the Caribbean, knowing about these trees, probably a good idea.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't we end this, Dan, with each of us talking about our overall thoughts of the Tamarind Seed? For me, I thought it was a little bit slow paced, but I liked the story and the acting. When I looked it up, it has a 6.4 rating out of 10 on IMDb and a 75% popcorn rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I kind of agree with that's about the place that this movie falls. It's not a home run, but I think if you're a fan of non-action spy movies, this one is worth a watch just for the performances. What do you think, Dan?
Well, it did okay at the box office when it was released. It wasn't a big smash, but it did okay. And there was some kind of financial stuff going on between the actors, and they were getting a lot of money, whatever. It kind of skewed the numbers.
Julie Andrews and Blake Edwards got, I think, between them 15% of the take.
Yeah, it was something screwy like that. And it was only nominated for one award, a BAFTA award for Best Supporting Actress for Sylvia Sims, who we talked about earlier. But she lost out, actually, to Ingrid Bergman. Okay. For Murder on the Orient Express. Okay. But I still like this movie, and I think it's worth a watch. Omar Sharif is spectacular in this. The plot line is good. The cinematography is solid. Music by John Barry. And Maurice Binder with the title sequence. Come on, give it a look. This review that we're doing here should help frame and shape. That's a hint for the Tamarind Seed for you.
That was so subtle, Dan.
All right. That's a wrap. This has been Dan.
And Tom.
Of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Subscribe to our show and our YouTube channel as well. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you spending time with us.